News this afternoon. Today, a gag order remains in place against Donald Trump after just last hour, the ex-president's lead attorney in the $250 million civil fraud case appeared in New York's appellate court. That attorney, Chris Kise, sought emergency permission to appeal the decision that reinstated a gag order on Donald Trump to the state's highest court. Last week, a state appeals court reinstated the gag order, which had been temporarily paused since mid-November. Currently, Trump and his attorneys are not allowed to make public comments about the federal judge in this case, Judge Arthur Engoron, or any members of his staff. In a court filing today, Trump attorneys write, quote, "Without expedited review, petitioners will continue to suffer irreparable injury daily as they are silenced on matters implicating the appearance of bias and impropriety on the bench during a trial of immense stakes," end quote. Joining us now outside the courthouse, MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin. Tara Palmieri is also back with us. All right, Lisa, make sense of what just happened for us.
So today, Ali, Trump's lawyers, as you just mentioned, came here to the courthouse behind me. This is what's called the First Department of the Appellate Division. It's the first level of appellate court here in New York. And they were seeking to be heard by Wednesday on this gag order so that Trump can testify this coming Monday. He'll be on the stand again, we've been told, on December 11th, and he wants to be able to testify free from the restrictions of that gag order. The gag order that you mentioned, it actually doesn't apply to Judge Engoron at all. It solely applies to his courtroom personnel. But of course, as you know, the sole focus, or the primary focus, of Trump's ire is the judge's principal law clerk, who he has accused of essentially being a partisan, one part partisan hack, one part Rasputin, whispering in the judge's ear to cast the trial as one of severe partisan bias against Donald Trump. They walked into the clerk's office this afternoon. They met a woman named Lauren, as in Bacall, Holmes, as in Sherlock, as she told all of the press assembled. She's a court attorney here who essentially told Chris Kise, "Your motion wasn't framed in the right way, and in any event, we can't get you heard by Wednesday." And that means the bottom line is that Trump will not get relief from this gag order by the time he's supposed to be on the stand. Our viewers might wonder, well, then what would be the harm of pausing the trial? In order to get that to happen, they would have to get Judge Engoron to agree to that. And that, as Chris Kise told me after he came out of the courtroom, is never going to happen. The expectation in an ongoing trial is that you have each witness ready after the last one finishes. And so if Donald Trump is in fact their last witness, there's really nothing more they can do to forestall that while they wait for this court behind me to issue a further determination on their bid to appeal the gag order, Ali.
Okay, so here's the thing. For those of us who don't follow it as closely as you do, these gag orders seem to be about disparaging things that Donald Trump and his team might say about witnesses, court staff, people, potential jurors, people involved in the case. Why is the Trump team arguing that this is somehow material to Donald Trump's testimony or what he can say on the stand? Why is Judge Engoron's clerk relevant to the outcome of this case?
So I'll give you their version of events. Judge Engoron's principal law clerk has been a candidate for office here in New York. Judge Engoron himself is an elected official, an elected Supreme Court judge here in New York. Their argument is that her involvement in partisan politics here in New York necessarily makes her a biased actor. And that, coupled with the fact that she sits next to Judge Engoron on his bench and has been repeatedly seen either talking to him in undetectable whispers, passing notes to him. They've accused her of rolling her eyes at them, yelling at them, speaking at them in ways that they characterize as disrespectful. According to them, that makes this entire proceeding infected with bias. As for why this matters before the expiration of the trial, Team Trump would say they're entitled to make a record prior to the appeal and basically memorialize what they see as these indicias of bias while the trial is going on. I'm not sure why it is that during the course of this trial, he needs to be able to say that. It would seem to me that they've already preserved their objection to that, Ali, on appeal. They can continue to do that once the appeal starts. But to them, they are characterizing this as a matter of core political speech. And the politics of this, I think, says everything, right? this is a core political speech act, according to them, and he has a right to defend himself against her political bias. But really what this is about appealing to their base and being able to blame what they see as the likely outcome of this trial on someone else, and chiefly the judge's principal law clerk.
This idea, Tara, of speech is one that comes up in every piece of litigation that Donald Trump is involved in. The beginning of the indictment, the Jack Smith indictment, is very clear on the fact that this isn't a question of freedom of speech. This isn't a question of the First Amendment. Donald Trump has every right to generally say whatever he wants to do. But it is important in the way he portrays this to his followers, that this is both a witch hunt and an imposition on his freedom of expression and things that he wants to say. So this almost feels as political as it does legal.
It's absolutely political, and he is at war. This is wartime. And actually, before he was even running for president, when he had Roy Cohn and his pit bull lawyer, they still did this. They tried to find a reason to, blame the prosecutors and say that they had some sort of axe to grind. Trump is the victim. And frankly, they're getting after, in this case, fraud. The idea that he is not a real businessman, he is not worth what he is worth. He defrauded people. And his whole entire ethos is about being a wealthy billionaire businessman.
And it really seems to get under his skin.
Exactly.
Because this is not the one that's going to send him to jail, if any of these cases do. But this really seems to bother him that the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. This is what he was for his entire life until he became president in his 70s. So, yeah, this is really getting at him. And he is the victim. He is the biggest victim of all. And he needs to show that. And if there's a political tilt, and it's also about intimidation. I mean, that is another facet of his entire legal, history. Roy Cohn, a master of political intimidation. Right. And if these people do have political ambitions, Trump wants to point it out and make it something that, this is the Biden Justice Department coming after me, and they'll come after you next. That has long been his message, and that is what he will continue to push, no matter what trial, what case, whatever it's about.
Tara, thanks as always.